Found a hotel here in Phoenix that had a reputation for being haunted, and I booked it for the weekend. The video had a figure on it that walked across and then disappeared, and they're not human and don't have human ears. I asked, how do you hear me speak? But the answer was, we call it death. We're not human anymore. We're not embodied in human. So it's kind of like a seance. Yeah, we've brought stuff home. We've had white figures fly right over the edge of our bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. But the other thing that would be great that we're going to start doing is helping with cold cases, where people know they lost somebody, but don't know what happened, how it happened. We've had our kids 10 years ago come out screaming and yelling that something's in their room. We actually had that house exorcised because we've asked, are you extraterrestrial? Are you multidimensional? Like, no, we're spirit. They'll flat out say that. Respond to a question that I asked with timing and relevance and intelligence. It proves that consciousness does in fact, survive death and goes on. We also believe that there are universal laws for entities, for spirits, that they're not allowed to give you information that's going to disrupt the life you're in. Because you're here for a reason, you're here to learn, you're here to grow.
Hi friends, welcome to another episode of the Chronicles of the Unexplained podcast. Today we're going to have a really interesting conversation. We're going to talk about something that is unknown topic that has been attracting many people nowadays, especially for those who believe in paranormal phenomena. Tony has a mind-blowing project to communicate with the dead people. With me is Tony Rathman. Tony, thanks for being here. Please present yourself to the audience so the people know about your project of Staticom 3.0.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me on. My name is Tony Rathman. I started out as a paranormal researcher because I didn't really believe in any of it. And then found out when my wife literally made me go that she caught stuff, and I was fascinated by EVPs. And so we spent a year or two focusing on EVPs, and we kept getting them. And then we got into ITC, or what's called instrumental transcommunication, which is basically ways of communicating with spirit through various instruments. And I've been an ITC researcher now for about 15 years. And my wife and I built spirit boxes trying to improve them. We didn't like how noisy they were. We didn't like the loud white noise that seemed to interrupt the understanding of what was being said. And then with some former partners, we were introduced to a spirit communication method called direct radio voice. And we joined team with them for a couple of years. And we elevated this system from direct radio voice, which actually used a radio. But the difference between a spirit box and direct radio voice is that a spirit box will scan up and down the dial of a radio. And the theory was that spirits will take those fragments of audio from radio stations and turn them into their own sentences. Well, that kind of seemed like a strange theory to us, because they would have to have the right fragments of audio in all the right places and then manipulate them at the speed of light to answer or reform sentences. Well, what we determined through our research was that the RF signal or radio signal wasn't needed at all. In fact, the only thing the radio stations did when the spirit box hit them was stop the spirit communication. So direct radio voice didn't scan the dial. It sat on a vacant radio station. So just the white noise sound would come through. And that worked one heck of a lot better. We got full sentences. The conversation was easier to understand because you weren't getting those bits of audio within what you were trying to hear them say. Then when we realized that the radio wasn't needed at all, we replaced it with a white noise generator. This was a huge step because not only did we no longer have a radio, but that was one of the major complaints from skeptics and scientists. They'd say, okay, well, you tell us that you're speaking with the dead, but you're using a device that's literally made to interpret radio waves in the atmosphere and turn them into either speech or music. So how do you know who you're speaking to? I mean, that was a good
question.
Right. It's a great question because when you're using a radio, what are you going to get? Speech. So when we removed the radio, that took all that away. A white noise generator cannot pick up radio waves. It cannot pick up satellite, walkie-talkies, baby monitors, nothing. And broadband white noise, which is every sound the human ear can hear from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, has no vocal data in it whatsoever. No words, no sentences, no syllables, nothing. So when we realized that we could ask a question and then get a full response, that was a major breakthrough. And then the other thing we did was, because spirits speak very quickly, we slowed down live white noise by 50%. So when Staticom runs, that live white noise is slowed 50% so that the responses that they give, we can hear, understand, and interpret.
So interesting. Okay, yeah, I was going to ask about that. If the, it was the typical electromagnetic waves, like the regular radio, the way that the radio works, right? So, and you mentioned about the decibels, or the, what did you say? Say again. I forgot the frequency.
Well, the frequencies vary from white noise is every frequency the human ear can hear, meaning that from the lowest sound that the human ear can hear to the highest sound the human ear can hear, they're all part of broadband white noise. So every frequency the human ear can hear is part of broadband white noise.
Okay, I'm going to start asking you, how did you come up with this idea to create this, how can we call it, like an electronic device?
Yeah, it's a method more than a device. So it actually uses a couple different devices, both hardware and software. The hardware brings in the signal and the software filters it. So it's not literally a standalone device like a spirit box. It's a method of combining hardware with software to get the results that we get. And that's based on filtering the white noise when the white noise is put into the computer. So
Okay.
White noise is basically that static sound you hear between radio stations.
Yeah, because there is no electromagnetic waves, right?
There would still be some sort of waves, because white noise is literally energy, frequency, and vibration. That's what it creates. But there's no way for it to bring in outside waves. It's a closed circuit. So the white noise is produced by the white noise generator. It's input into the computer. All we do is filter it with programs that take out the white noise, increase the sound of the voices, and then we cut off the sound of the white noise, because white noise is at a spectral frequency of 1, which means it's at a constant level across every frequency. Well, at the end, we can cut that out, only leaving the voice.
So when you mentioned that there were like complete phrases, sentences, give me an example of sentences captured. Like you mentioned that you didn't believe in that, so your wife took you to maybe like a haunted place.
Well, she had an interest in the television shows that were coming out 15 years ago, Ghost Hunters, all the big names.
Oh, I'm
She kept saying to
fan
me,
too.
yeah, she kept saying to me, "Oh, you got to watch this. You'll love it." My dad was a physics instructor, so everything I asked as a kid, Dad, why is the sky blue? Oh, because there's water vapor in the atmosphere. When the sunlight hits it, blue's the most reflective color. That's why the sky looks blue. It wasn't about spirits or entities or, anything like that. So, I'd watch about 2 minutes of it, and then I'd get up and she'd be like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "I don't believe any of this. This is for TV. It's entertainment." Well, then on Valentine's Day of 2010, she said to me, "I want to do something different." I said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" She goes, "I want to go ghost hunting." And I was like,
Oh my.
kidding me. Well, I had two choices. I could take her or have her mad at me until next Valentine's Day. I didn't want that. So I said, okay, fine. So I did some research online, found a hotel here in Phoenix that had a reputation for being haunted, and I booked it for the weekend. I thought, okay, I'm done. And I'm like, wait a minute. These people were using equipment. What does she need? So I went out and I bought her a night vision camera, digital recorder, and EMF meter, and thought, okay.
EMF.
So I went for the weekend with her. We spent the weekend. I played along. I pretended like, I was having fun. I asked questions. But when she got that stuff home and she started reviewing it, she started going through the pictures, and there were things in the pictures that weren't there when we took it. And I'm like, what? The video had a figure on it that walked across and then disappeared. And I'm like, no, wait, but those aren't what fascinated me the most. What fascinated me the most was the EVPs. We were down in the basement of this place, only two people, 2, 3 in the morning. I don't know what, nobody was up, nobody was around, and most people weren't even allowed in the basement. And we're asking questions and we're getting answers on the recorder. And that absolutely fascinated me. And it fascinated me for a variety of reasons. Out of any paranormal piece of equipment, I mean, it may play music or flash lights or beep or, you might get a picture or an image. But what I liked about asking a question and getting a response was before I even listened to the response, I could tell if they were male or female. I could tell if it was an adult or a child. I could tell their mood. Were they happy? Were they angry? Were they upset? Were they scared? I could tell if they were speaking a different language or whether it was English. I could tell if they had an accent, a Southern accent, a European accent, an Australian accent. I could get this bucket of information before I even listened to what their response was. But then even more fascinated by that they would respond to a question that I asked with timing and relevance and intelligence. That was absolutely mind-blowing to me.
Yes, I can imagine. So before that, Tony, you didn't believe in paranormal stuff at all?
When I think back, there were a couple of experiences that I probably question now, but I really just dismissed them back then because it wasn't in my thought process and it wasn't something that I thought about. And then starting 15 years ago, it's something I deal with every single day now. So I'm used to it. I've proven it to myself. And we work on building communication devices, not to prove that they exist, because we know they do, but to prove that communication can actually occur. Even if there's no one standing in front of you, you can get intelligent answers. And then it's also to find out what more we can learn, how much information they'll share, what we can possibly learn about life, the reason for it, why we're here, whatever they'll give. And we've gotten some great information so far, even with past versions of Staticom. And now we just recently upgraded to Staticom 3.0, which is a couple weeks old, 2 or 3, I think 3 now. And we're doing some final modifications and adjustments to it, but it's been extremely productive for us.
Wow. So this is a complete system because you mentioned hardware, software.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something before to continue with this interesting conversation. Have you played before Ouija boards?
Yeah, when I was younger, and I think there was a couple of investigations. We've investigated all over the country. We've investigated in the Philippines, Japan, and so somebody always has one, and they're playing with it. Have I seen results that I think, oh my gosh, this is productive? At times, maybe, but to me, again, it is a piece of equipment. It is something that, very well possibly could be interacted with. But it's hard to tell the validity, whether something was actually paranormal or whether somebody twitched a finger or, so it's really hard to determine. It was the same thing with communication devices that use a radio. It's really hard to tell the difference between reception from the radio and deception. Was that a spirit? How can you clarify which is which? You really can't, because you're using a device that's made to take radio waves and turn them into speech. Now we don't have that problem. So getting to communicate was always my top interest. Other devices, other electronic devices, they all contain one flaw to them that made us step away and find a way to get communication without any of that low-hanging fruit that says, well, you're probably getting stray radio waves, or somebody probably moved their finger and bumped it, or
or with the EMF that, like, our body has this electromagnetic field that even we can manipulate those devices. I don't believe personally in the EMF. A lot of mystery, a lot of theories, all are theories. So I studied engineering and I work for a biotechnology company. I'm going to be honest with you, when I saw your web page, the blog about Staticom, Entity Voices, I think, yes, Entity Voices brought my attention a lot. So tell me, like, a typical day when you and your team go to a specific place. Has to be a haunted place, or that communication could be everywhere?
Sure. That communication can be gotten anywhere, which is why if we are at a haunted location and we get voices, we don't consider those voices to say the place is haunted, because you can get them anywhere. We've taken it all over, run it in, I don't even know how many locations. What you can tell, though, is that when you're getting entities or consciousness that's from the location, because we were running it in Tombstone, Arizona, an old west town.
I've been there.
But they were talking about the bird cage. They were talking about the whiskey prices, the poker games that were nonstop at the bird cage. They were talking about everything from prostitution to, so that what they were talking about was local to the area. So can we have that happen? Absolutely. Now, do you have to be at a haunted location to get them to? No, you don't.
Really interesting. Okay, so tell me, what is your perspective about, so do you believe there are other, my question to you is, if you believe in different dimensions, what do you think about it? What is your perspective? What are your beliefs?
And that's a very good question. And here's the reality. Regardless of what religion you are, there are some very basic truths of information that we've gotten from disembodied consciousness, which is who we believe we're speaking to, and they will literally tell us that's who they are.
Has to be a haunted place, or that communication could be everywhere?
Sure. That communication can be gotten anywhere, which is why if we are at a haunted location and we get voices, we don't consider those voices to say the place is haunted, because you can get them anywhere. We've taken it all over, run it in, I don't even know how many locations. What you can tell, though, is that when you're getting entities or consciousness that's from the location, because we were running it in Tombstone, Arizona, an old west town.
I've been there. Yeah.
But they were talking about the bird cage. They were talking about the whiskey prices, the poker games that were nonstop at the bird cage. They were talking about everything from prostitution to, so you know that what they were talking about was local to the area. So can we have that happen? Absolutely. Now, do you have to be at a haunted location to get them to? No, you don't.
Really interesting. Okay, so tell me, what is your perspective about, so do you believe there are other, my question to you is if you believe in different dimensions. What do you think about it? What is your perspective? What are your beliefs?
And that's a very good question. And here's the reality. Regardless of what religion you are, there are some very basic truths of information that we've gotten from disembodied consciousness, which is who we believe we're speaking to, and they will literally tell us that's who they are, because we've asked, are you extraterrestrial? Are you multidimensional? Like, no, we're spirit. They'll flat out say that. So, you know, when you start talking about other dimensions, well, if they're not in front of me, I can't see them. I can't know they're there, which means none of my physical senses, my 5 physical senses of my body, can identify where they're at. But yet I can ask a question and get a response from nobody. They have to be somewhere else. Now, whether that's multi-dimensions, whether that's time-space differences, I can't answer that because I don't know their variables. But what I can answer is that they're not in the same dimension that I'm in, or I would know they were there.
Have you thought about, as you mentioned, there is a possibility that they could be extraterrestrial instead entities, or maybe when we say entities, there are a lot of varieties of entities, ghosts, residual energy, apparitions, demons, I don't know.
There's all sorts of names, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
The problem with naming them is it's what's called a paranormal axiom, meaning that, yeah, you can say spirit, ghost, demon, but no one really has a definition, or there's no way to verify that definition. Can you get an upset spirit that many people will say, well, that's demonic? Yeah, you'll see people do that all the time. But does that truly mean they're demonic? No, I'm not saying that negativity or dark stuff doesn't exist. The world, no matter what part of it you look at, for every positive, there's a negative, because by definition, one balances the other. You couldn't define darkness if you don't understand what light is. And everything works that way. You can't define what dry is if you don't know what wet is. So if there are angels, would there not then logically have to be a darker version? Yeah, I would think there would. And that also creates balance within the environment.
Yes, totally agree on that, Tony. So when you say that these answers have been from anybody, like has this consciousness, so what are the typical questions you ask for you to know, okay, to get a response, like a coherent response for you to determine, okay, this entity or whatever you want to call has the ability to, I mean, is a rational, I mean, not rational, it's like a thinking mind, right? Because it's answering what you are questioning. Give me examples. What type of questions?
We've asked so many questions, I could spend the next couple of years explaining them all. But
A couple of examples.
when we first started out, we were asking questions that we could verify. Spirits, can you tell me my name? Boom, you hear your name. Okay, yeah, they can. Spirits, how many fingers am I holding up? Simple questions to begin with when we first started. Then we got more scientific as time went on. We'd hold up an object. Spirits, what am I holding up? And they'd tell us, like if I said, spirits, what's in my hand? You would hear glasses. Then we got into even tougher questions, like me being human. When I speak, I'm using my larynx and my throat to create vocal sound waves, which another human has follicles in their ear. Those follicles vibrate, translate that vibration into a liquid center of the ear, which also then vibrates, which sends messages to the brain to say, okay, that's speech, and interprets it. But if I'm human and I'm speaking in my normal tone of voice without a mic, we don't broadcast our voice, we just speak normally. And they're not human and don't have human ears. I asked, how do you hear me speak? And I think that's on one of the clips that I sent over. But the answer was, we call it death. And I think that was just their way of saying, we're not human anymore. We're not embodied in human. And then they said, energy of the mind. That's the thing. Which makes complete sense because we did years of EVP work. And a lot of times we would notice that their answer to our question would show up on the recorder before we even finished asking it.
Wow.
So
interesting.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just thinking like I don't know, where are you from, or are you from another realm, another dimension, another planet? I would ask those questions. I would be a little bit afraid if there are like bad entities. To be honest, when I started to do this podcast, I went to a different haunted places. I went to New Orleans. My husband is from Louisiana. We went to a tour here in Austin, Texas. I don't know if you have heard about Driscoll Hotel.
Yep.
So haunted. And so we went there. I wanted to capture things. And I was so disappointed because I didn't get anything. And I was a little bit upset. I had sleep paralysis, vivid dreams with sleep paralysis. Many things started happening to me. I was trying to get a logical explanation. My mom told me, no, it's because you have been doing a lot of paranormal stuff and maybe your mind is playing tricks on you. So I tried to convince myself because of that. But many things happened. Tony, it would be really long to say, but how do you know if those answers are coming from demons, bad spirits, upset, entities? Have you had any bad situation when they told you go away or something like that?
Well, we've run into spirits that are not happy. And there may have been one time that we ran into something a little more vicious, because the energy completely changed when this entity started speaking, and they were not happy. It actually affected the machine to the point where we eventually shut it off because it was just going crazy. But in 15 years of communication, we've never had a problem. Investigating, oh yeah, we've had stuff follow us home. We've had all sorts of things, but the communication is different because it doesn't require them to come to you. We don't believe spirits are bound to time and space. Both time and space is a human construct. It's man invented. And they don't have those rules. So for them to communicate with us, they don't have to be here. They can do it from anywhere. And that probably helps with avoiding complications because they're not necessarily right in front of you. Could they be? At times they could be, but they don't need to be to communicate. When it comes to communication, if we're being called to investigate a location or we're investigating it ourselves, oh yeah, we've brought stuff home. We've had white figures fly right over the edge of our bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. We've had our kids 10 years ago come out screaming and yelling that something's in their room. And then when we turn the communication on, not only did they say, yes, sorry, we were in there, we didn't mean to scare her, they apologized. And then we've had some stuff that was much uglier. We did a investigation of a home in Las Vegas, and we had the worst communication I've ever heard, vulgar and just mean. There were moving objects. There were silhouettes of shadowy white stuff coming down from the ceiling and flying across the room. We actually had that house exorcised.
Amazing.
So
Oh
have
my
we
God.
run into, and I don't want to say demonic because, again, Hollywood, television shows, YouTubers like to really play that up. It was darker, but I wouldn't say demonic. But yeah, that one house, they actually did a rite of passage on it to clear it. And she hasn't had trouble since, so apparently it worked.
How do you all protect to be able to do these researches or to be able to go to different places? Is there like a ritual to start with? Before to do this investigation, because obviously this is a little bit hard for you and your family. You don't want to bring anything at home, right? You want to be in peace,
Right.
especially for your kids. So have you learned anything like to say, oh, this is a lessons learned? We're gonna do this ritual. I don't know, maybe prayers or something.
Yeah, we have done over the 15 years everything in the book. We have a whole set of prayers that we used to use prior and after, including religious tokens, coins, amulets, saging, you name it. And depending on what we do after depends on what the location was like. And is that the right way to handle it? Probably not. If you're going to do it, you should probably do it each and every time, regardless of what occurs, because you just never know. And you asked me before, how do you know who you're speaking to? We don't. Bottom line is, we don't. But what we have noticed is that when they give us information that we can look up and research, about 90% of the time, 93, 94, what they tell us and we can research is correct. And I mean, even on one of the clips I think I sent you, my wife wasn't feeling well. This was literally a day or two when we got version 3.0 running. But I asked the spirits, is my wife getting sick? And they said, yes, possible. And then they flat out said yes. And I said, well, what should she take? And they said some word, but I didn't know what the word was. I went back, because I obviously recorded it. I went back. The word was Percodan. So I looked it up.
Was what? Sorry?
Percodan.
What is that?
That's, I had to look it up. I didn't know what it was. Percodan is a prescription strength pain reliever.
Oh, I think I saw it in one of the clips you sent me. Yes.
I didn't know what it was. So for them to tell me what they thought she should take when I didn't even know what the word was. I mean, I heard it. I didn't even move. I didn't know what the word was. When I looked it up and like, oh my gosh, this is a prescription strength pain medication. They were 100% right.
Oh my God, unbelievable. Yeah, I remember I saw that short video you sent me. Yes, and I saw that word and I was thinking, what is that? Oh my God, so interesting. So, okay, currently, because you have been a lot of years doing this research and doing this, is your plan to sell this Staticom or continue to do this paranormal research? Are you thinking maybe get a patent for the system?
It's a method. So, patents are expensive. They are between 20 and 30 grand, especially on an electronic media. So that's a lot of money, 30 grand to shell out for a patent. Secondly, some of the devices used in it are already patented. So now you're taking pre-patented material, changing the way that it's used, and then you have to show that it differs from the original patent and it's expensive. So will we patent it? Probably not. There are other people that are using similar methods and getting same results.
Okay.
What's the future of it? Absolutely. We will continue to do public demonstrations. 3.0 is only weeks old, but we did that all the time with 2.0. We let groups come in, hear it, hear the answers given, let them ask their own questions and get their own answers. So it's kind of like a seance, but the difference is instead of getting your answers from somebody else and hearing them tell you what message they got or what they're feeling, everyone in the room can hear the answer for themselves. So it's a big difference from having somebody sitting in front of people going, well, I'm getting a feeling, or you're getting a message, and that message is, it's not personalized. But when somebody comes up and says, I miss my grandfather, his name was so-and-so, is he there? And then you see their face go white when a response comes through and they're like, that was him, that's his voice. Or they ask a question only he would know and they get that answer. It's so much more personalized and so much more being able to relate, because you can see that recognition of who they were hoping to talk to and them being able to identify themselves as who they are.
I was just thinking, for example, if I want to get answers from, I don't know, my grandma that passed away. So I could reach out to you and say, hey, Tony, I would like to get a communication with my grandma. How can be sure it's going to be her spirit? My question is like, can I trust to get in communication with this person? So how often have you seen people saying, yes, this was my dad or my relative that passed away, but how many others have said, no, that is not my relative? Is something else, something more sinister or more maybe upset entity, maybe trying to confuse the people in the sense? Tell me a little bit more about it. Have you
We've had
any...
lots of people identify past loved ones. We've also had them test. We had a woman, we did a presentation in Sedona, and she had lost her son a year or so prior. And when he was in hospice, they had a code phrase. And she asked that. She asked for him, asked for the code phrase, and he literally said it through the machine. And she's like, oh my gosh. Then she asked, what was your dog's name? And the voice said the dog's name, and she knew it was him. Now, have we ever had somebody go, that's not them, this is something else? No, we've never had that happen. Could it happen? Yeah, because we don't know those variables. The only thing we can tell is whether we got a response, whether we heard a voice, whether it responded to the question. Can we see what it is? Can we know where it's coming from? And do we know who it is that's speaking? No, we don't. None of those variables are available to us for us to determine that. But we can tell from, like I said, 15 years of doing this, when they're being truthful and if it's something that's not acting the same. And when that happens, we just shut it down.
So, for example, Tony, so when these phrases are being said during those seances, what is the mechanism for you or for that system to use to be able, like, the people could hear it? There are like speakers.
Correct. The voices come through
speakers. Okay.
Voices come through speakers. But
okay.
It's how the voices get into the method. Because like I said, there's no AI, there's no word banks, there's no nothing. It's white noise. White noise contains no vocal data whatsoever. We had a gentleman in one of our sessions said, I have a question, can I ask? And we were like, yeah, go ahead. So he walked up and he asked his question in his Native American language. So we had no idea what he asked. So we just all waited, and all of a sudden we saw his face, his jaw drop, his eyes get wide. I said, did you get your answer? He said, not only did I get my answer, but I got it in my Native American language.
Unbelievable. Oh my God. Wow. Other question. Have you had any psychic person on those senses? You know, these persons have the ability. It is called ESP, extrasensorial perception, ESP.
Correct.
So those people, my son has that. My son, since he was little, I was going crazy. That is other reason I started with my podcast, because I wanted to write a book, and then I started to hear podcasts. So gave me the idea to start one, to tell everything that my son has experienced during his short life. He's 26 years old. This ESP, these persons can sense and detect many situations, like vibrations, energy. Have you had any psychic or any person with ESP during those senses, Tony?
Absolutely, we have. And for people that say they have those abilities and really do have them, there is an unbelievable connection between what the method spits out and what they say or the messages they get. And sometimes they're identical. So psychic may say, okay, I'm seeing a man, he's probably, 40s or 50s, and then the machine will say his name. And then the psychic will be like, that's his name, that's his name. And they play off of each other quite nicely. But we've also had it where somebody said, well, yeah, okay, I've got psychic abilities. And we started off, and the machine literally says she has no ability.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And what does the psychic or this person have said about it?
They didn't stick around long. They disappeared.
They didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, we know there are a lot of people that, fake people, right? Saying that they have the abilities, and the reality is they don't have any. My son, he has like a psychic, he says it's like a radar like something is going on here or with this person. He has like a severe headaches, catching up vibes from the places. But so it would be really interesting to do some kind of seances with my son in the Staticom. So yeah, when you mentioned Tombstone, I've been there and I went to the bird cage.
Yeah.
It's a museum. It's interesting, and we were in that area. We went to Bisbee, Arizona as well. It's interesting, like mine town is pretty well. Tony. So I was just reading something in the blog, and there is a phrase that caught my attention: the supernatural turned natural. So tell me, what is the inspiration for you to say the supernatural turned natural? I like the phrase when I read it. So tell me a little bit more about your blog.
The whole thing about the supernatural turned natural is that when we started realizing that this stuff occurs, this isn't fake, this isn't something that we're imagining, it's not something we think we're hearing, because hopefully a couple of those clips will get played that people can hear that this is clear speech. But it made us take a look at what we believe reality to be. And this stuff, reality to us, is based on two things. A, what we were taught, maybe by science, maybe by religion. But life is only interpreted by your senses, which means that life is 100% mental, meaning that even when science says, okay, there's a rock, how much does it weigh? How big is it? What's it made out of? What's its dimensions? That representation of it is not the rock itself. The rock itself is something different from its measurements, but you can't even measure the rock until you perceive it, which means perception has to come first, which means that consciousness is the starting point of everything, which is why we believe the reality to us is that we came from universal consciousness. Now, whether that's called God, as religion likes to call it, or universal consciousness, which science is starting to believe might exist through quantum physics and all sorts of other stuff, but that we become a separate part when we're human. And then that information is still transmitted back and forth between what we learned during this life and universal consciousness. And when we pass away, we return to universal consciousness, and all that information is shared by everybody who is now one with one mind and universal consciousness, which is the same thing you were saying about somebody who's psychic or has abilities. Their human body is just more porous to allow that information in than somebody who can't hear it, see it, feel it. That we believe to be the only difference. So these things are not supernatural when they occur. They're natural. This is part of life. It is part of life after death. It's part of the universe, whatever dimensions exist in it. We don't know 90% of the variables beyond what's here on Earth. But in order to try to explain it, either scientifically, religiously, or from a philosophical standpoint, it's almost impossible to explain something if it's not something that happens, if it's not natural. So in order for it to be EVPs to be caught by hundreds of thousands of paranormal investigators, for voices to come through electronic machines, for people to see spirits or shadow figures, and have that happen time and time again for thousands of years, people have said, okay, I saw a ghost, or I saw whatever term they use for it. But in order for that to occur, It has to be something that's natural versus what we call supernatural.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's true, Tony. Like the example that you gave is perfect with a rock. The part, right, has a mass, has a weight, but you perceive that too. Like science measure things, and everything that can be measured is a fact. Like the science can prove that. But there are many things that can be measured, like, for example, the love to your wife, right? You
Right.
know that exists. How do you measure it? There is no point, there is no way to measure. And
Correct.
so still nowadays, scientists still in denial. There is no God, there is no other life. When we die, there is nothing. This universe, the Big Bang, all these kind of theories they want to prove, but they can't. The Big Bang, I mean, has to be something beyond, like a superhuman mind to create this universe, because everything is perfect. Gravity, everything in the planet, right? So there are many things out there that you can't measure, and because you can't measure, that doesn't mean that it not exists, right?
Well, exactly. And you made a very good point. Science doesn't tell you what something is. Science will predict future behavior, how it's going to react under certain conditions, what elements maybe make it up, but science doesn't tell you what something is. Philosophy tries to determine what maybe something is. Are they always correct? Maybe not. But the other thing about science is that in describing it, measuring it, they tend to replace what they think it is with its description or measurement. And that's two different things. Measuring something, what it weighs, how many molecules it has, doesn't tell you what it is. And the only way we can determine what anything is through our five senses. We see it, feel it, touch it. Without those senses, which are limited, visual senses can only see, or eyesight can only see visible light. There's ultraviolet, infrared, all sorts of visual spectrums we can't see. Yeah. Human ears can only hear 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. There's sub-frequencies above and below that we can't experience. So yes, the human body limits what we're allowed to interpret or experience. So then you have to step back and say, okay, what's beyond that? Now, will we be able to determine that? Probably not. But when you can perceive experiences through your mental cognition of life, does it matter? Like if somebody says, oh, I saw that, nobody else saw it. Does that mean it didn't exist? That person saw it. That person had the experience, the emotional charge of whether it made them happy or sad or angry or scared. Is that any less real than anything else? If they believe they... No, it's not, because it's mental. Everything in life is experienced from a mental cognition, meaning our own perception. And I can't see life through your eyes or through your understanding. I can only see it through mine. And then we've got the problem of how things are labeled, where vocabulary itself tells us that something is a thing. Like if I say, what's this? And somebody says, well, that's a fist. Okay.
Or a hand.
Where'd it go?
Yeah. So
the fist isn't a thing. It's a behavior of my hand. Fist doesn't exist. Only if the behavior of my hand creates it. So that's the other problem with terminology. And then, of course, you've got the complications between what science says. And don't get me wrong, science is right. One of the things we tried to do when figuring this out was not conflict with science. The other we wanted to not conflict with was religion. And I don't care what religion, it doesn't matter, because the basic understanding, if you take away names and titles, and the basic foundation is very similar across every religion in the world. So we managed to do that without changing the path, saying that, okay, universal consciousness is where all life comes from. When we're human, we are a broken part of that, and then we return, which also explains, people say to us, okay, well, you know, if you're talking to somebody from the 1800s and you're using a digital recorder, how are they going to know what that is? Well, if it's shared consciousness, that information continually gets fed back from everybody who's lived. And so they'll know anything you know. And that's also how we believe we get the information. If they don't have eyes, and I say, what am I holding in my hand? And the method says glasses. They're not getting it from anywhere but me knowing what I'm holding is glasses.
Yeah.
Do I believe they can see? I do, because I said, what color's my shirt? But again, I'm thinking it also. If I'm thinking white, you know, so again, how the actual variables break down that information comes back, we don't know that 100% yet, but we know the information does come back and it is correct.
Yes, very true, Tony. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm convinced there is something else when we die, and that is scientifically proven. Like a matter transforms. We are matter. We're gonna be transforming, and it depends the perspective, as you said, talking from religion perspective, from psychology, from science perspective. Everybody will think different, but we will be transforming in a different type of matter. We don't understand we don't understand yet, because until we passed away, we will know what is going to happen with us.
Well, that's a great point, and I completely agree with you. The human body is physical, being made up of atoms and molecules, oxygen, water, all sorts of other things. Eventually that will decay. But even the laws of physics say energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only change form. If I'm sleepy and I only ran off of food, then all I would have to do is eat a big meal, and technically then I shouldn't be tired anymore. If that's truly but that's only the energy source for the body, which means there's another energy source that must recharge while we sleep. To me, that's consciousness, spirit, soul, whatever you want to term it. But otherwise, eating a big meal, you wouldn't be tired anymore. But that's not how it works. I forgot what I was going to say after that. But anyway.
That's fine. What I was going to say to Tony is like emotions. You mentioned emotions. So why the psychologists exist, right? There are emotions in a human body. So and how can you measure an emotion? It is you can't. Exactly. So go ahead.
Well, to your point, there's certain things that can't be measured. Consciousness is one of them. You know, science is still trying to determine, is it created in the brain? Well, how is that possible? If the brain is made up of the same material that a rock is made up of, then how come the rock doesn't have consciousness? And if it does, which is panpsychism, which says everything has consciousness, well, then if my table has consciousness and I cut a leg off, do they now both have consciousness? What happens if I reattach the leg? Does it still have to, so that there's problems there. The problems with science saying that it is called the hard problem of consciousness, meaning they can't determine where it came from. But then you even said better points. Can you measure the depth of my love? No, you can't. Can you measure the taste of a strawberry? But yet every one of us knows the delight of chocolate or a strawberry, but yet that can't be measured because it's not quantifiable.
Yes.
But yet those are emotional responses that elicit effects on us because, oh, I love the taste of that. That tastes great. but science can't measure that, but we know it exists. So we know that science is evolving and will continue to evolve based on the information that they receive. And hopefully things like Staticom will allow people to go, oh my gosh, he is really communicating with something that's not physically in front of him. How is this happening? To me, it proves that consciousness does in fact, survive death and goes on. And, my wife used to ask questions when we first started doing this, and she would say, how did you die? And I kept saying to her, they wouldn't be able to answer if they were truly dead and not there. If they can answer, they're not dead.
Exactly. They will say, I'm not dead. I'm still here.
The response, I'm not dead. I'm right here. You can hear me, right? But one time she did ask, and I think the understanding, because she came up behind me when I was running it, and because somebody said something about a year or something that they passed, and she comes running up behind me. She goes, how did you die? And then the response came back, clear as a bell, I had cancer. And we've never heard somebody answer that question before, so that was a great response. But the other, there was no emotion in it. It wasn't like they were shocked. I mean, they knew where they were, what had happened, how it happened. And those are the answers that we get that are absolutely, fascinating from a standpoint of, what information you can get and what they're aware of and how it happened. But the other thing, like I was saying, though, about the information that we get and the high reliability of things that we can research and look up, it's one of the things that we want to do with the clarity of 3.0 is it's always nice to be able to maybe calm somebody a little bit who's grieving, lost somebody, and give them a perspective that, hey, life does go on. But the other thing that would be great that we're going to start doing is helping with cold cases where people know they lost somebody but don't know what happened, how it happened. We believe Staticom will be a huge player in being able to maybe acquire some of those answers or information that is unknown.
Tony, we are in sync. I was thinking exactly the same because there is a movie. I don't know if you have watched it, The Gift, with Kate Blanchett.
Yep.
So there was a murder there, right?
Correct.
And I was thinking, okay, this system or method, because you call it method,
Right,
could help, like in many ways, to be able to know what happened with someone that was, murder or something, like a missing person. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, we completely agree, and we've put information out there that and we've got some leads to start. We have a few other processes to finish first, but that's one of the things we want to do. The other thing that we know is, and people always say, well, wait a minute, if you can just ask questions and get answers, did you ask how the pyramids were built? Did you ask if Atlantis existed? There are so many questions that we could ask that I could spend the next 20 years just asking questions. Now, would that still be interesting to do? Absolutely. But we're going after questions from either a research perspective to determine what answers we can find out about what the afterlife is like, maybe to help grieving people or lost cold cases. And the questions that we ask, we have found out over the past couple of years that they'll give us information about things that have already happened, but they will not give us information about future things, about future decisions you want to make, what the winning Powerball numbers are. Trust me, we've asked. They will not answer. So we also believe that there are universal laws for entities, for spirits, that they're not allowed to give you information that's going to disrupt the life you're in, because you're here for a reason. You're here to learn. You're here to grow. And they're not allowed to disrupt that. In fact, we've actually had communication where they're answering questions, and then we've heard 5, 6 other spirits come in and go, stop talking, don't answer his questions. And then we've heard them say they shouldn't have answered that. We stopped them. And then they're gone. We don't hear from them again.
Oh, wow.
So we believe there is some conformity that there are rules on their side as well about what they can and cannot share.
Interesting. Oh my God. Well, this has been really interesting conversation. Never thought about it was gonna be so good. Tony, thank you very much for your time. Was a pleasure to meet you virtually. I want to thank my listeners to be part of this podcast, Chronicles of the Unexplained. And Tony, just please let us know the information about the blog, webpage. I'm gonna put everything in the links in the description of the episode, but just please remind here to the listeners so they can go and see the amazing project you have.
You bet. So the website is entityvoices.com. And there you'll see everything from past investigations we've done. Actually, I think only about a fifth of them are up there. I haven't had time to put all the rest of them. But there's entire Staticom section. There's podcasts we've done. There's places where we're going to be coming up, either demonstrating Staticom or talking about it on podcasts. You will find the blog that she was talking about, which there's articles about Staticom, how it was developed, how we created it. We also have a 3-part docu-series on Paraflix called Knowingly Talking to the Unknown. It's free to watch. There's links on both the website and my Facebook page, Tony Rathman. That'll take you right to it. You can watch all 3 docu-series on how it was developed, how we came about. If you go to YouTube and just type in Staticom, there's probably, I don't even know how many, 150 clips of evidence that we've captured using this method. Those are the easiest places to find it. There are other places, but I think there's a Twitch account and a Instagram, but they don't have as much information as the ones I just listed.
One more time, thank you very much for your time today. It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you, listeners and friends from this podcast, Chronicles of the Unexplained. Thank you. See you all in the next Unexplained story.